Federal agents just kicked in doors across 3 states. And what they found blew the lid off America's most volatile movement, Antifa.
It's a terrorist organization, in my opinion, and we're going to find out. All those questions are going to be answered.
But what people really need to understand, Antifa, is that their true enemy is our system of government and our society as a whole.
The FBI and Department of Homeland Security just revealed they've taken down the operational core of Antifa, a network prosecutors now tie to arson, charity fraud, and coordinated assaults on police. In Georgia, 61 defendants were charged under the same racketeering laws once used against the mob. In Portland and Chicago, federal task forces are rounding up suspects accused of domestic terrorism. For years, politicians called Antifa a myth. Now, grand juries are calling it a criminal enterprise. And behind the arrests, encrypted chats, and out-of-state funding trails, a web of ideology that just got dragged into the daylight. This goes beyond street protests. This is organized resistance, and the government just declared war on it.
This is something the president campaigned on because we have seen a rise in violence perpetuated by Antifa radical people across this country who subscribe to this group. And unfortunately, it's gone widely uncovered by many in the legacy media. It also went completely ignored by the previous administration. Not anymore.
It started just after midnight in Atlanta, but months before FBI and DHS were unleashed in the brutal raid, agents had been tracking a group that called itself Defend the Atlanta Forest. A loose network of activists, eco-warriors, and self-described anarchists who turned a construction site into a war zone. But they weren't the only ones. Small groups had been popping up in several states across the US over the last few years, wreaking chaos and destruction on the American people using bombs and homemade weapons. On the outside, these looked like random groups with different missions, not at all connected, but when investigators looked closely, they found more than one thread connecting these small groups to a larger, more dangerous, organized group, Antifa.
If anything comes up for you or you're triggered, in this environment, we care about your inner safety as well as your physical safety. That's how we roll as Antifa. We love people.
It was becoming an organized resistance, and when law enforcement moved in on the Defend the Atlanta Forest hub that night, what they found was worse than expected. Tents reinforced with sandbags, stockpiles of fireworks, gasoline, and body armor. Georgia's Attorney General called an emergency briefing. A few hours later, 61 names of top Antifa members appeared on an indictment stretching over 100 pages, with charges of arson, money laundering, and racketeering under the state's RICO statute, the same law once used to dismantle the Italian mob, now, for the first time, aimed squarely at self-proclaimed anti-fascists. Why? According to prosecutors, the self-proclaimed unorganized group is actually more organized than it seems. Appearing as though they're without a structure is a tactic Antifa uses to get away with heinous attacks. But not anymore.
They allow people into their membership. They have votes, they have leaderships. It's much more organized than people realize.
Now investigators knew their strategies. They could easily connect the attacks cause. While they wanted them to appear random, their attacks were part of an organized campaign spanning multiple states. But the Georgia arrests were just the beginning.
We just got an update from the U.S. Justice Department on a shooting that left an El Laredo police officer injured this weekend. The Department of Justice calls this an ambush near the Prairie Land Detention Center.
10 days later, in Texas, an ambush outside the Prairie Land ICE Detention Center left a local officer bleeding from the neck. Investigators say attackers used fireworks to lure guards outside, then opened fire from the tree line. By sunrise, 10 suspects were in custody, but here's the part that had investigators confirming their theory. The gear they found during the Texas ambush matched what agents had seen in Atlanta, the same tactical vests, radios, and propaganda manuals titled Organizing for Attack, Insurrection, Anarchy. Those parallels caught Washington's attention fast. Within weeks, DHS and the FBI launched coordinated raids in Portland, Chicago, and Los Angeles, targeting safe houses and digital accounts tied to Antifa-aligned collectives. Officials described it as a national enforcement phase, a shift from observing them to the direct dismantling of their organization. Inside the seized apartments, law enforcement found encrypted phones, hard drives full of chat logs, and printed maps marking police facilities across several cities, facilities they likely intended to hit. For years, Antifa had been treated as just an ideology, but now, what the investigators found told a different story. The reality was, they were a movement behaving like a network, moving funds like a syndicate, and striking like an army. So, for the first time, prosecutors are calling Antifa what it always denied being, an organized criminal network. And behind every arrest file, investigators found a pattern. A few members were usually connected across several arrests, even though those arrests were from different states. They also found a few names kept coming up in their encrypted chats. But they found the smoking gun when they looked into how these groups recruit. It typically starts online with private servers on Discord, Signal, Matrix, where new recruits are invited to have casual conversations around politics, trade memes, and blueprints under digital nicknames. While it simply begins as political debate, it quickly morphs into the logistics of violence. They teach them things like how to block police vehicles, how to build a firebomb that burns hotter and longer, and how to erase metadata after an operation, so if one of them gets caught, they can't be linked to each other. That same communication tactic is used in recruitments in all these small groups. The very same tactic, almost like there's a handbook being passed around. And the cherry on top, investigators were also able to trace some transactions in Antifa's accounts to microchannels cross-linked to hubs in Oregon, Michigan, and New York. And guess who these hubs are connected to? To the same groups investigators raided. Each hub had its own media liaison, a finance collective, and a set of rotating moderators who issued the new recruits real-world assignments. Former member Gabriel Nadal says, breaking Antifa down into smaller hubs is how the organization stays detached from the consequences of the violence. He calls it an ecosystem of chaos, fueled by a single belief that America's institutions can't be reformed, only dismantled and destroyed. FBI analysts mapped more than 200 actions perpetuated by these small groups that all seem to be connected by identical tactics: diversion with fireworks, ambush from concealment, ending with digital brag posts hours later. Even the slogans match. They had the same fonts, the same phrasing, suggesting they shared templates amongst each other. But perhaps the clearest signal came from the money trail. One PayPal account in Portland received small donor transfers. The same day, a Georgia safe house ordered bulk camping fuel and respirators. A charity in New York sent grants labeled community outreach to a shell group whose only expense was protective gear. When agents raided a townhouse outside Seattle, they found 3 Faraday bags filled with phones, flash drives, and instruction booklets labeled Security Culture 101. One file inside read like a corporate manual, complete with shifts, passwords, travel budgets, all for an organization that officially doesn't exist. For years, the public saw masked crowds and assumed they gathered spontaneously. But inside federal databases, the same crowds were easily connected. Different cities, but the same command structure. At the core of the movement is hate for all structures. They believe that police are the machinery of oppression, that capitalism is the root of fascism, and that the environment must be defended by any means necessary.